opportunity. Please keep in mind,
Maybe
as I
quint
indicated, that my focus is on whether or not there have been these unwanted contacts that have reasonably caused her alarm, both subjectively and objectively, and justify the issuance of a permanent stalking protective order. So it's your turn now. Go ahead, sir.
So I'm not sure where she's coming with a lot of these accusations. We were dating. What I thought we were a boyfriend situation, and we were going to be potential roommates. She filed the paperwork for me to be her roommate in her apartment. The hand-on-throat thing, I do not know what she means. When we were having consensual intercourse, I did touch her neck because it is an erogenous zone. There was no violence or anything to that nature with the touch. The next morning after we had intercourse, she proceeded to tell me her life story about how, several guys in her past had choked her and hurt her. And to me, that brought up a lot of red flags, and I did not want to be a part of that. I decided not to move in with her due to the fact that she seemed very unstable to me, and I just wanted her to get some psychiatric help. I proceeded to take my belongings out of her apartment and have no further contact with her. She continued after that to see me on the street. I am homeless, and she knows exactly where I hang out in the city, and she would make, constant, why aren't we getting back together? And, why won't you come back over? And why don't you want to move in with me? And, I told her the reasons why I did not want to be a part of that anymore. It was too much for me, and that it triggers things from my past when I had an abusive relationship with someone else. And I did not want to be a part of that anymore. The incident at the park that she was talking about, I felt harassed by her, so I pretended to videotape her and her friend because I thought she brought her friend over there to fight me over what, I'm not sure. Several instances, she would call my name in the street, my full name, saying I did this and that to her, which was false. She would talk to all the homeless people on the street saying that I had choked her, which is simply untrue. We did have consensual intercourse a couple of times, and we were going to be boyfriend and girlfriend, but she had told me that she's bisexual and she wanted nothing more to do with that. She didn't feel the same way as I did with her. And I just figured that I did not want to move in with her anymore after that. And so I took my belongings and had no further contact with her after March. I had said no words to her. This summer, I went on vacation and came back, and all of a sudden I'm being interviewed by police, and she's accosting me down the street, and then she files this against me.
So let me ask you this. She testified that there was an incident that occurred at Mr. Carge's home. Do you recall anything about that?
I do not recall that specific incident. Mr. Carge is her, I think she takes care of him. He is mentally ill, but he is also her boyfriend some of the time. I'm not really sure how that works. She, I think, has multiple boyfriends and girlfriends. I'm not really sure about that, but we did share an incident, me, George, and her together. But it was nothing like that, nothing that she stated.
So did you ever put your hand around her throat in a threatening manner?
I did not, Your Honor.
Did you ever have contact with her in a way that was designed to scare her, or did you have unwanted sexual contact with her?
I did not, Your Honor.
The incident that she described with the quarters and her knuckles, can you tell me about that?
Yes, we were walking to the college to go to a food bank together, and there was some change in the street, and both saw the quarters and jokingly said we're both going to pick them up at the same time, and we may have bumped into each other, but I don't recall her having any bloody knuckles or anything. We were laughing about it.
Okay. Anything else you want to tell me about these accusations?
I believe she has a vendetta against me and the homeless people and the facility where I stay at occasionally. And she was taking it out on me simply for the fact that I did not want to be with her anymore. And that made her very jealous and sick to harm me, to defamation of character and slander. And for the past month, I've had to, watch exactly where I go because she could be lurking around any corner ready to call the cops on me. I have done nothing wrong. And
thank you, Mr. Quint. Ms. Ng, do you have any questions for Mr. Quint? If you do, you need to tell me what they are, and I'll determine whether or not to ask them.
Okay. Yes, Your Honor. Thank you for allowing me.
One question at a time. Go ahead.
Mr. Quint, why is it...
You're going to tell me what the question is, and I'm going to ask it if it's appropriate. So what's your first question?
Why do you falsely allege that I wanted to be in a relationship with you or a dating relationship with you?
That's not an appropriate question.
Okay. What led you to believe that I wanted to have a dating relationship with you?
Okay, that's an appropriate question. So what led you to believe that she wanted to have a dating relationship with you?
By inviting me to her home several times a week, by the intimacy that we had, by filing paperwork to have me move into her apartment.
Thank you. Next. Any other questions, Ms. Ng?
Yes. Could you ask, or if you would allow me, Your Honor, to ask the question, are humanitarian motives to shelter an unsheltered person not sufficient? Why must you assume that there is a sexual motive or a romantic motive to my humanitarian agenda?
No, that's not an appropriate question. Next question.
Well, if he believes coming over to my house implies a sexual relationship, Your Honor, would I be allowed to ask, am I having sexual relationship with all 7 of my recent house guests? None of whom have.
I don't think you can ask him that because he's not going to know. He's not there. You can certainly testify. You've already testified that your intentions towards him were humanitarian and that your relations with him were not consensual, that you've given me that testimony. He can't testify about that. He can't climb into your head and talk about what you think. Go ahead.
In what context would a hand around the throat ever be an appropriate activity, whether dating or non-dating?
No.
Could I ask, in order to put your hand around someone's throat, there must be a discussion as to whether or not that is fair, appropriate, not coerced, or there is
He denied that he put his hand around your throat. He said he touched your neck. There's a difference.
Put his hand around my
I know, that's what you've told me, but that's not what he said. So let me ask him, did you put your hand around her throat?
Simply caressed her neck. I did not, Your Honor. I simply caressed her neck.
Okay, so that's what he's saying happened. You're saying something different. It'll be up to me to decide who I believe. But so.
Okay, could I ask, Your Honor, would it be best practice prior to putting an opposable thumb around the Adam's apple of a woman as you apply pressure to her jugular, that you ask her if that is a safe activity that she would like to engage in consensually, under no duress, no coercion, and no fear of further retribution or violence or emotional explosion?
No. Next question.
Could you ask, Your Honor, could I ask the respondent if he recalls the conversations we had about his hand around my throat in which...
That's a good question. Do you recall having conversations with her about you putting your hand around her throat?
I do. That was the day after that I touched her neck while we were having consensual intercourse. She proceeded to tell me her heavy history of past abusers who had done that to her. And that's what brought up the red flags to me, that I did not want to be a part of this relationship anymore.
And did you ever touch her neck again after that?
I did not touch her neck, nor did I see her ever again after I took my belongings out of her apartment.
Okay, Ms. Zhang, next question.
Your Honor, could I ask him what he means by consensual intercourse? Because for the record, I have described a coercive ripping off my clothes to apply oral sex to me in fear of rape, and I've described his pushing of his genitals in my face.
I know that's what you've said, but that's not what he says. So you can ask him, what can you want to ask him? You want to ask, what's the question you want to ask him? What is consensual sex?
Well, what does he mean by intercourse? Because for the record, I want it stated there was no vaginal penetration.
Well, you've stated that, but he's saying something different. So let me just ask him, Mr. Quint, what was the consensual intercourse you described?
It was intercourse, penetration, oral sex, all the things that we did at that time.
Because I will state for the record, his penis never entered my vagina.
You've said that, but again, he's saying something different. That's what happens in a courtroom. Different people say different things, and you're both under oath. So but you can. So do you have any questions for him?
Mr. Quint, how much drugs and alcohol do you take per day is what I would ask, or do your use of chemical substances impact your memory?
Okay, the second question is okay as it relates to these issues. So, Mr. Quint, do you have a substance problem that impacts your ability to remember things?
I do not, Your Honor.
Thank you. Is a next question?
Could I ask, Your Honor, if Mr. Quint recalls a conversation in which I discussed how uncomfortable I felt around Matt Williams regarding his punching out Sierra's tooth, or around Ozark, Iraq?
No, because it doesn't matter.
Well, Matt Williams is his witness, Your Honor.
Well, after he testifies, if there were questions about Matt Williams, you could certainly ask those. It doesn't look to me like we're going to finish this today, but we'll see. So hang tight for a second. Do you have any other questions for him about his testimony? The question about Matt Williams is beyond the scope of his testimony. That's one of the rules of evidence. It's limited to the scope of the testimony. So any other questions about what he's testified to?
I apologize, Your Honor.
It's okay. I know you're not a lawyer. It's okay.
I apologize.
So go ahead.
Your Honor, does the recall his conversations with me about black men, which sexualized my attentions towards them?
What's the relevance of that?
I found it to be very harassing, very predatory, very possessive, and very jealous. And that, I believe, may be a motive as to why he was putting his hand around my throat, is jealousy about my social interactions and some kind of racist attentions towards my black friends.
Were you jealous of her black friends?
No, I was not, Your Honor.
Next question, Lizzie.
If you will allow me, Your Honor, does the respondent recall our conversation about fight, flight, or freeze? And it was a conversation in which I described he was what I called victim blaming me for my freeze response to his hand around my throat.
Nope.
And he
it's not relevant at this point. Nope, I'm not going to let you ask that. Any other questions? Okay, Mr. Quint, do you have any additional witnesses you would like to call?
Yes, can I call